All right, another topic that we're going to deal with today is bullying, and this might be one that sits a little bit different or a little bit outside of depression and suicide and cutting the other three videos that we're doing and topics that the student ministry is covering. But unfortunately, we're at a place in our country where we've seen this end in a horrific way as far as school shootings, and we know that someone does not wake up one day and decide to act on extreme violence like that. And the reality is it starts at the level of bullying. And really, a lot of times at the most innocent level where we've seen kids grow up and they're either included or they're not. And it can start out with being excluded from a group and spending the rest of your growing up years trying to fit in, trying to belong. And when you reach this place where you feel like you stand all alone, and you want to make a point and get back at people, it could have devastating effects and consequences, as we've seen. And so we'll simply define bullying in its simplest definition. It can be defined as a person or a group that is threatening or attempting to harm a weaker, more vulnerable individual. And so you as the parent, there's a lot of different parents watching this. Many of you probably have kids who have been bullied themselves. They've been made fun of. But some of you might have kids who you're like, yeah, my kid is a bully. I need to know how to pull him out of that and help him see that that's not the right way to interact with other people. And so we want to give you some specific tips for how to approach if your child is being bullied and if your child is a bully. I do want to say, though, that sarcasm, is popular in our culture. And I think it's okay to a certain extent, but it can be very negative in its intent even when it belittles someone. And we'll come back to that at the end of this video. But I want to make sure we all have high expectations for our kids as far as the way that they joke around. Because a lot of times, really at any age, we see this as adults, people will make jokes in groups of people where they'll single out another person just for the sake of getting laughs from the other people in the group. And it could start as small as that. That seems trite. But those are the very things that we need to teach our kids to pay attention to. A lot of times it can take place in the family where anything goes. Everybody says whatever they feel to their family members and can form bad habits there. But teenagers cross the line of bullying when they cannot make fun of themselves as much as they do others, or if they cannot be the object of others' jokes. And so when I'm talking about joking and sarcasm and things like that, I think that's the measuring stick. Is what I'm saying, if someone said it to me, would it be okay? Would I be able to laugh at myself in that state? And if I couldn't, if my feelings would be hurt, that develops empathy within your student. And so it's just a gauge and a conversation there. We see all kinds of bullying these days: physical bullying, verbal, psychological, racial, sexual, even cyberbullying. Where kids can get online and just shoot different messages to each other, and it escalates, and that can be a very negative thing. And then we also see spiritual bullying where kids are made fun of their faith. And so at the end here, we'll give you some tactics and some tools to be able to handle those things. But it's important to know that bullying and violence are two sides of the same coin. When I talk about these kids that go into their schools and actually are at that point where they're going to shoot up their school, regardless of any person in front of them. Verbal bullying often leads to physical bullying, which then leads to violence. And so there's different layers here. It just continues to escalate. And obviously it can result in suicide or homicide. And so this isn't about school shootings specifically, but it is important to know and to understand so that you can see a kid who's going down this path. What's interesting is attacks on schools are most often premeditated. It's not something that just happens. Nobody doesn't just automatically get to that point. There are typically verbal cues that express their plans, a desire to harm, and curiosity with violence, like making a bomb or an obsession with firearms or something like that. There might be verbal cues in morbid song lyrics, dark and disturbing stories, artwork. Those are different things to pay attention to. Now, the most common mistake made by the friends and the adults who were present in the lives of these school shooters was that in processing their verbal and behavioral cues after the fact, many commented that they didn't think the shooter was actually planning or even capable of committing this act. So again, most of the kids that we know in this world are not going to go to that extreme, but what is it that we can do to stop where it starts? where we're able to teach kids that if you continue to go down this path, you're only going to continue to escalate. Your anger is going to get worse, your bitterness is going to rise, and you're going to become a vindictive person who just wants to bring other people down. And you're going to reach this irrational state that you never would have even imagined when you set out in this way. So if your child is being bullied, if you're a parent of a child who is being bullied on a regular basis and he's just at a loss or she's at a loss as far as how to handle their peers, I want to give you a few tips here. Number one, teach that violence is never an acceptable form of problem solving. Now, it's easy, I think, for us guys, and if you're a dad, to be like, you know what, just punch them back. And we definitely feel that in the moment. It's like we want to, eye for an eye, and it might feel right at that time. Maybe there are some cases where you're going to teach a valuable lesson, but here's why. It's not just because we're supposed to respond in a way that is grace-filled or patient or more tolerant. That's not even the point. The reason why we don't want to just respond back and reciprocate the same way that a bully acted upon us is because they thrive on the reaction. They thrive on the response. Bullies thrive on the reactions of what they would consider their victims. And so they objectify this person and they say, I'm going to use this person to make myself feel better. They have a high desire for control, and they've built this image for themselves. And so they thrive on the reaction. If you don't give them a reaction, then you gain control of that interaction. Another thing as a parent is to teach and model being slow to anger. This is difficult because the teenager will be justified in his anger if he wanted to respond with physical violence or revenge in that way. But bullies like to be in control, and so they enjoy the ability to get a reaction, as I was saying. But if the student can even somehow inject humor in maybe a slight funny way that makes light of the situation and communicates to the bully that, hey, what you're saying, what you're doing doesn't really affect me that much, then the tables are almost turned, indicating that the victim is now in control. And that's what we mean by establishing a healthy response to that situation. Another thing is set boundaries so your child knows how to stand up for himself and has a plan for what he's going to say. So unfortunately, I'm guessing that a lot of you as parents have had multiple occasions where your child has come home and given you the same scenario. The girls are saying certain things about your daughter, or the boys in the locker room are doing the same things toward your son. And so the cycle is repeating where they've been kind of singled out as the one that gets picked on. And so it's important to talk this through and coming up with a game plan, not just going to tell the people that are in charge in those situations. That's part of it as well. But you want to teach your kid how to stand up for themselves. So what am I going to say in this moment when that is said? Am I going to say something funny to get out of the situation? Am I going to be bold and to be confident and to let that person know that I am who I am and you can say whatever you want to say, but it's not going to affect me in that moment? Establishing specific boundaries for them. The last thing if your child is being bullied is to instill with them confidence. Maybe give them some personal stories of when you were growing up. Make sure they're connected to other peers that are more positive. Seek those out through church. The biggest thing that I've seen is this is just not talked about often enough, even in your youth groups, where you raise the bar, you raise like a no tolerance level where this is not going to be accepted. Because people who respond in a way where they're unaffected by bullies because they understand there's something more going on beneath the surface of the bully themselves, they just live to a higher standard. So the way that they're living unaffected is actually more respected than the bully who gains control and gets their way. And so I just recommend to you all as parents to have that conversation with your kid, but also their peer group and their youth group. Now, the last thing, if your child is a bully, obviously you're frustrated by that on a whole different level, I would encourage you to do whatever you have to do to let him or her know that you love them, be involved with them, actually show concern. If my kid is a bully, I don't like my kid in that state. I'm going to be upset by the fact that he or she is acting in a certain way. But I also need to be on his or her side to let them know, hey, this isn't you. I know that you have more to offer. I know you're capable of acting better. What's really going on here? Show that you love them. Show that you're concerned for them, even in the midst of your righteous anger toward them. Let there be no bullying in the marriage relationship as far as the way that you model what it looks like to interact with other people, especially the person that you're married to. John Gottman, a marriage psychologist, he said the number one predictor of divorce is contempt. And what contempt is an interaction or a demeanor between two people. He could predict with 90% accuracy whether a couple would get divorced, not based on what they would say, but how they would say it to each other. And so when contempt in a relationship exists, it's one person positioning themselves above the other, where the way in which they talk to their spouse, they're talking down to them, they're demeaning them, they're objectifying them. If that's taking place in the home, you're modeling almost a form of bullying that they will inevitably repeat because they think that that's just how things are supposed to be done. That's how things are supposed to be communicated to other people to get your way and to gain control. A couple other things, and these are just extremely practical, hopefully obvious things. If you're at a point where your child is being a bully and gaining control, honestly, I would eliminate all alcohol from the house because honestly, that can demonstrate a lack of control. A lot of people who drink alcohol, they drink it as an escape and they lose control. There's a dependence there that they can't stand on their own. It's an escape from reality and a dependence on the wrong thing, which I know you all understand. One of the last practical things is I would get rid of all violence, exposure in the home, and that would be through media or especially video games. And when kids are in this constant state of violence and playing a video game, I mean, you've seen this play out, and it's easy. We've played them ourselves to get wrapped up into this story, this drama, and we just go around, shooting people. And so that does something to the mind. That trains the mind to objectify the human being. And really, when think of it, they call it a video controller. You're in control. You have absolute control. Well, what's the main problem in bullying? It's the constant obsession with always having to have control. You want to control the people around you. And so they might, if my kid is bullying, there's no even ounce of violence in any video game. No, I'm not saying all video games are wrong, but if they've reached that state, then it seems like an obvious thing to do at that point so that they can just kind of reframe their mind and gain a new sense of normal. The last thing is come up with healthy outlets. Above all, model control and being slow to anger in your everyday life, all your interactions, just showing up and being there, making yourself available, not being an absent parent. Those apply in all areas, but especially in bullying because they need to know what it looks like to be that healthy example.